Mary had lived in the same little house for more than 40 years. It sat on a quiet street where most people kept to themselves. The paint on the front porch was chipped, the garden fence leaned a little, and the old oak tree near the driveway dropped leaves like slow rain every fall. Mary used to complain about the mess. Now she missed the days when there were 2 sets of footsteps in the home. Her husband, Robert, had passed away 3 years earlier. People in the neighborhood said he was a good man. He was calm, polite, and always ready to fix a loose hinge or carry groceries for someone older than him. But he was also private. He kept his feelings tight, like a knot that never loosened. Mary had accepted that about him long ago. Marriage, she often told herself, was not about knowing every thought. It was about living beside someone and choosing them every day. Still, after Robert was gone, small questions began to sit in Mary's mind. They were not loud questions. They were quiet, stubborn ones. Why did Robert sometimes stay up late in the storage room? Why did he keep a set of keys that Mary never saw him use? Why did he always avoid talking about his childhood, as if the words would cost him something? Mary never had answers. She told herself it did not matter anymore. But some parts of the house felt like they were holding their breath. That afternoon, Mary decided to clean the storage room again. She did it often, mostly to keep busy. The room was small and smelled like old cardboard and dry wood. It was filled with things that once belonged to a different life. A cracked suitcase from an old trip. A broken lamp that Robert said he would repair someday. Boxes of holiday decorations, each labeled in Mary's neat handwriting. She moved slowly, careful with her knees. The winter air outside made her joints stiff, and the house heater did not reach the storage room well. Mary pulled on a thick sweater and tied her hair back with a simple clip. Then she opened the closet door and stared at the crowded shelves. She started with the lowest shelf. Old blankets, faded and soft. She folded them neatly and stacked them again. Then she pulled out a box filled with Robert's tools. The tools were clean, lined up like soldiers. Robert had always taken care of his things. Mary ran her fingers over the handle of his old hammer and felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest. It was strange how a simple object could bring someone back for a moment. Mary set the box down and stood up, breathing out slowly. She looked around the room and noticed the large wooden cabinet against the wall. It was heavy, older than their marriage, and it always made the room feel smaller. Mary had never moved it. Robert had once said, "Leave it where it is. It fits best there." Mary had laughed and agreed. Now, for no clear reason, she wanted to move it. She placed both hands on the cabinet and pushed. It did not move at first. Mary tried again, using her shoulder. The cabinet scraped the floor with a loud sound that made her flinch. Dust puffed up from behind it. Mary coughed and waved her hand in front of her face. Then she heard something that stopped her cold. It was not a voice. It was a sound from the floor. A hollow sound. Mary froze. She leaned down and tapped the wooden boards with her knuckles. Tap, tap, tap. The sound changed as her hand moved across the floor. Most of it sounded solid. But near the wall, under where the cabinet had been sitting, the sound was deeper, like the wood was covering empty space. Mary's mouth went dry. She tapped again, slower this time, as if her hand was asking the floor to explain itself. The hollow sound returned. Her first thought was water damage. Her second thought was worse. She could not even name it. Her heart began to beat faster, and she felt the kind of fear that does not come from a clear danger but from the unknown. Mary lifted the corner of an old rug that had been hidden under the cabinet for years. She had never seen it clearly before. The rug was faded and thin, like something placed there to be forgotten. Under it, the wood looked different, cleaner, almost protected. There were faint lines in the floor, straight lines that formed a square. Mary stared at them, her hands trembling slightly. The square was not large, but it was clear enough now that she knew she was not imagining it. The lines looked like they had been cut into the wood on purpose, then covered and hidden. Mary felt a sudden rush of heat in her face. Her thoughts were spinning. Robert had never mentioned anything like this. Not once. Not in all the years they lived here. The room had always been a storage space. Simple and ordinary. And yet the floor was telling a different story. Mary leaned closer and brushed the dust away. Her fingers found a small metal ring, flat against the wood. It was dull, the color of old silver. It was tucked so carefully into the floor that it almost disappeared. Mary whispered, "What is this?" Her voice sounded strange in the quiet room. She felt silly speaking to an empty space, but the silence pressed on her ears. She reached for the ring, then stopped. For a moment, she pulled her hand back. Her mind flashed with a simple thought, maybe I should not open it. Maybe this is not for me. But then another thought came, sharper and stronger. If it is under my house, it is for me to know. Mary gripped the ring and pulled. At first, nothing happened. The ring resisted, like it had not been used in a long time. Mary pulled again, harder. The wood creaked. Then, with a soft click, the square shape shifted. A section of the floor lifted slightly. Mary stumbled backward, startled. She stared at the gap. Cold air rose from below, carrying a smell of dust and something older, like the scent of closed books. She took a step forward again, slow and careful, and lifted the wooden hatch a bit more. Darkness waited beneath it. Mary held her breath. There was a ladder. It was narrow and wooden, built into the opening. The ladder disappeared into the dark space below the house. Mary could not see the bottom. She could not even guess how deep it was. The darkness seemed thicker than normal, like it had been kept hidden on purpose. Mary's hands shook again, but this time it was not only fear. It was shock. A deep, confusing shock that made her feel like she had stepped into someone else's life. She stood there for a long time, listening. The house was quiet. No footsteps. No voices. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the ticking clock in the hallway. Mary slowly lowered the hatch back down. The wood rested in place like it had never moved. She placed the rug back over it, then sat on a small stool near the shelves. Her mind was racing, but her body felt heavy, as if the discovery had taken her strength. Robert had hidden a room under the floor. Why? Mary thought about the years. The holidays. The arguments over small things like money and repairs. The quiet nights when Robert read his book and she watched TV. She thought about all the moments that seemed normal. Now those memories felt like they had a shadow behind them. Mary tried to be angry, but the anger would not come. What came instead was a deep sense of confusion. She loved Robert. She had trusted him. And yet, there was a secret under her feet. She stood up and walked into the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water and drank it slowly. Her hand was still shaking. Mary looked at the phone on the counter. She wanted to call someone. But who? Her daughter lived in another state. Her neighbor Anna was kind, but Mary did not want to sound foolish. Still, she knew she could not handle this alone. She picked up the phone and set it down again. Then she walked back to the storage room and stared at the cabinet. She stared at the rug. She stared at the floor. Something about this felt planned. Like Robert had wanted the hatch to stay hidden until the right time. But if that was true, why did he never tell her? Why did he leave her to find it like this, by accident, with her heart pounding in fear? Mary sat again and placed both hands on her knees. She took a deep breath and made a decision. Tomorrow, she would ask for help. Tomorrow, she would open the hatch again. Because whatever Robert had hidden, it was still there. And it was waiting. Mary did not sleep well that night. She lay in her bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. The ticking clock in the hallway felt louder than usual. Every small creak made her open her eyes. Her thoughts kept returning to the hidden floor and the ladder leading into darkness. She tried to remind herself that the house was safe. She had lived there for decades. Still, something had changed. The house now felt like it was holding a story she did not know. When morning came, Mary made her tea and sat at the kitchen table. She barely touched her breakfast. Her hands were steady now, but her mind was not. She knew she needed help. She could not face whatever was under the floor alone. Mary picked up her phone and called her neighbor Anna. Anna lived 2 houses down and had known Mary and Robert for years. She was practical, calm, and never jumped to wild ideas. When Mary explained what she had found, Anna went quiet for a moment. "Are you sure," Anna asked gently, "that it is really a room?" Mary looked toward the storage room door. "I saw the ladder," she said. "There is something under the house. I know it." Anna did not laugh or question her further. "I will come over," she said. "We will look together." Anna arrived less than an hour later. She wore a simple jacket and flat shoes, ready to help. As soon as she stepped inside, she noticed Mary's nervous energy. "You look like you have not slept," Anna said. Mary gave a small smile. "I probably did not." They walked to the storage room together. Mary moved the cabinet aside again, her movements careful and slow. She lifted the rug and revealed the hidden square in the floor. Anna leaned down and studied it closely. "Well," Anna said quietly, "this is real." Mary pulled the metal ring and opened the hatch. Cold air rose up again. Anna shined a flashlight down into the opening. "There is a ladder," Anna said. "It looks stable." Mary hesitated. What if this was not meant to be found? Anna looked at her. "Mary, it is your house. Whatever is here, you have the right to know." Mary nodded. She placed her foot on the first step of the ladder. The wood held firm. Anna stood close behind her, holding the flashlight steady. Mary climbed down slowly. Each step made her more aware of her age, but she refused to turn back. When her feet touched the ground below, she felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Anna followed carefully. The room beneath the house was larger than Mary expected. It was not wide, but it was long enough to stand comfortably. The walls were reinforced with wooden beams. The floor was clean. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, switched on by a pull chain near the ladder. Anna pulled the chain, and the room filled with soft yellow light. Both women stood still, taking it in. The room was not abandoned. It looked cared for. Shelves lined the walls, neatly arranged. Boxes were stacked carefully, each one labeled in clear handwriting. A small table stood in the center with a wooden chair pushed in close. Mary felt her chest tighten. "He was here," she whispered. "Recently. Not just years ago." Anna nodded. This room was used. Often. Mary walked slowly to the shelves. She touched the edge of a box and brushed away a thin layer of dust. On the label, she recognized Robert's writing. Dates. Short notes. Nothing dramatic. Just quiet records. Mary picked up a notebook and opened it. Inside were pages filled with careful writing. Lists. Names. Places. Short comments about meetings and tasks. It did not read like a diary. It read like work. Anna looked around and pointed to a small metal box on the lower shelf. "That one is locked." Mary stared at it. The box was solid and heavy, the kind meant to protect what was inside. She wondered how long it had been sitting there. On the table, Mary noticed a single envelope. It was white and unmarked except for one word written across the front. Mary. Her breath caught. She picked up the envelope with shaking hands. It felt thicker than a normal letter. Anna stepped back, giving her space. "Take your time," Anna said. Mary sat down in the chair. She held the envelope for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a folded letter and a small key taped to the paper. Mary unfolded the letter and began to read. The words were calm and clear. Robert's voice came through them easily. He wrote about the room and why he built it. He explained that it was never meant to frighten her. It was meant to protect something important. Something that needed quiet and care. Mary's eyes filled with tears, but she kept reading. Robert wrote that he had always believed in helping people without being seen. He wrote about his past and how kindness had once saved him when he was young. He said the room was his way of giving that same kindness back, slowly and carefully, over many years. Mary pressed her lips together. She felt shock, but also recognition. This was like Robert. Quiet. Thoughtful. Hidden. Anna watched Mary's face closely. "What does it say?" she asked softly. Mary looked up. "He was helping people," she said. "All this time. Without telling anyone." Mary stood and walked to the shelves again. She opened one box and found letters. Thank you notes from people who never knew who Robert was. Some were short. Some were long and emotional. All of them spoke about relief and hope. Mary realized then that the room was not a place of secrets meant to hurt her. It was a place of purpose. But questions still remained. Mary turned to the metal box. She took the small key from the envelope and held it in her palm. The key felt cold and heavy. "What if this changes everything?" Mary said. Anna met her eyes. "It already has," she replied. Mary unlocked the box. Inside were documents, carefully arranged. Records of donations, plans, contacts. Everything was organized. Robert had thought of every detail. Mary felt overwhelmed. She lowered herself back into the chair and placed her hands on the table. "Why did he never tell me?" she asked quietly. Anna sat on the edge of the table. "Maybe he was afraid you would worry," she said. "Or maybe he thought this was something he needed to carry alone." Mary nodded slowly. She thought about all the evenings Robert spent reading, all the quiet phone calls he took in another room. She had trusted him without knowing the full truth. Now the truth was here, sitting under her house. Mary took a deep breath and stood up. "I need to understand all of this," she said. "Not today. But soon." Anna smiled gently. "I will help you," she said. "You do not have to do this alone." They turned off the light and climbed back up the ladder. When Mary closed the hatch, it no longer felt like hiding something dangerous. It felt like closing a door to a story she was only beginning to read. As they moved the cabinet back into place, Mary felt a strange calm settle over her. The room beneath her house was no longer just a secret. It was a beginning. Mary spent the next few days in a quiet fog. She went through her normal routine, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every time she walked across the floor of the storage room, she felt the presence of the space beneath her feet. The hidden room was no longer just a surprise. It was a question that followed her from room to room. She did not open the hatch again right away. Part of her needed time. The letter from Robert sat on her bedside table, folded carefully. She read it every night before sleeping, trying to understand the man she thought she knew completely. Mary remembered their early years together. They were not rich. They saved slowly, skipped vacations, and fixed things instead of replacing them. Robert had always been careful with money, but never greedy. He gave small gifts to neighbors and left tips that felt too large for their income. At the time, Mary thought it was just his generous nature. Now she understood there was more behind it. On the fourth morning, Mary called Anna again. "I am ready," she said. "I need to see everything." Anna came over with a notebook and a calm expression. Together, they moved the cabinet and opened the hatch. This time, Mary did not hesitate. She climbed down the ladder with steady steps. The fear was still there, but it was quieter now. The light filled the room again. Mary stood still and looked around, as if seeing it for the first time. The shelves, the table, the chair. All of it told a story of patience and planning. Mary began with the notebooks. She sat at the table and opened the first one. Each page showed dates and simple notes. Names were written carefully, sometimes with short descriptions. Single parent with rent trouble. Older man needing medicine. Student fees overdue. The words were plain, but the meaning behind them was heavy. Mary felt her throat tighten. These were real people. Real struggles. Robert had known their stories and chosen to help quietly. She moved to the next notebook. It went back years, even decades. Robert had been doing this long before Mary noticed anything unusual. It was not a sudden decision. It was part of who he was. Anna sorted through the boxes on the shelves. She found folders filled with letters and small cards. Some were written in careful handwriting, others messy and rushed. All of them spoke about relief. About someone stepping in at the right moment. About hope returning when it was almost gone. Mary picked up one letter and read it slowly. The writer thanked a stranger for paying a medical bill that would have taken years to clear. Another letter spoke of a family that kept their home because help came just in time. Mary closed her eyes. She felt pride and sadness at the same time. Pride for the good Robert had done. Sadness that she had never known this side of him while he was alive. She turned to Anna. He carried all of this alone. Anna nodded. Some people believe kindness works best in silence. Mary stood and walked to the far wall of the room. There, she found a small shelf she had not noticed before. It held a few old photographs. She picked one up. It showed a young Robert, much thinner than Mary remembered him, standing beside another boy. They both looked serious, but there was warmth in their eyes. On the back of the photo was a single line written in faded ink. "We survived." Mary felt a deep ache in her chest. She realized then that Robert's past had shaped everything. Whatever he went through before meeting her had taught him how fragile life could be. Mary sat down again and opened another notebook. This one was different. The writing was more personal. Robert had written about his thoughts and fears. He worried that if people knew what he was doing, they might judge him or try to control his actions. He worried that the money would lose its purpose if it became public. He also wrote about Mary. He wrote that she was the strongest person he knew. He wrote that hiding the room was not about hiding from her. It was about protecting her from worry. He believed that if she knew, she would carry the weight of every story with him. Mary wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He was wrong about one thing," she said softly. "I wish he had trusted me." Anna placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe he trusted you more than anyone," she said. "Enough to believe you would understand when the time came." Mary thought about that. The letter with her name on it. The key. The careful way everything was organized. Robert had not abandoned his work. He had prepared for someone else to continue it. Mary opened the metal box again and looked through the documents more closely. She saw plans for future help. Notes about people who might need support soon. Everything was dated and clear. He planned beyond his life, Mary said. He knew this day would come. Anna nodded. And he chose you. Mary felt a shift inside her. The confusion and shock were still there, but something else was growing. A sense of responsibility. They spent hours in the room, sorting and reading. Time passed without notice. When they finally climbed back up, the sun was already setting. Mary made tea for both of them and they sat at the kitchen table. The house felt quieter than usual, but not empty. "I do not know what to do next," Mary admitted. Anna stirred her tea. "You do not have to decide everything now," she said. "But you do not have to stop either." That night, Mary lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the people in the notebooks. About the letters filled with gratitude. About Robert working alone in that small room, choosing kindness again and again without expecting anything in return. Mary felt the weight of his past settle gently on her shoulders. It was not a burden. It was a gift. And with it came a choice she could no longer avoid. Mary woke up before sunrise. The house was silent, wrapped in the soft gray light of early morning. She sat at the edge of her bed and rested her feet on the floor, breathing slowly. Her dreams had been filled with faces she did not recognize. Faces from the letters. Faces from the notebooks. People Robert had helped quietly, people whose lives had crossed his without ever knowing his name. She walked into the kitchen and made tea, the same way she always did. But this morning felt different. The cup in her hands felt heavier, as if it carried more than just warmth. It carried a decision she could no longer push away. Mary knew she could close the hatch and forget the room. She could lock it and treat it like a strange memory. No one would blame her. She was older now. She had already given much of her life to others. Rest would be understandable. But the thought left her uneasy. Later that morning, Anna came by again. Mary had asked her to come early. They sat at the table, the sunlight slowly filling the room. "I keep thinking," Mary said, staring into her cup, "that if I walk away, it would feel like turning my back on him." Anna listened quietly. "He trusted me with this," Mary continued. "Even if he did not say it directly. He left the room. He left the plans. He left the choice." Anna nodded. "And what does your heart say?" Mary took a deep breath. "My heart says I am afraid. But it also says I cannot ignore this." They went down into the hidden room together once more. This time, Mary brought a small notebook of her own. She placed it on the table beside Robert's notebooks. The simple act felt important. Mary began to read the final pages of the last notebook again. Robert had written instructions, but not commands. He listed groups he trusted, people who had proven themselves over time. He wrote about patience and caution. He warned against rushing or making promises that could not be kept. Mary respected that. She knew she would have to learn. She could not simply step into Robert's work without understanding it. She spent the day organizing the room. She did not change anything major. She only made it clearer. She grouped the notebooks by year. She placed letters in folders. She wrote small notes for herself, questions she wanted to answer later. As she worked, Mary felt closer to Robert than she had in years. She imagined him sitting in the chair, focused and calm. She imagined his careful steps down the ladder, his quiet presence in the house while she slept upstairs. Mary paused and sat in the chair. She closed her eyes for a moment. "I wish you were here," she said softly. "But I think I understand now." The next step was harder. Mary knew that continuing Robert's work would mean stepping outside her quiet life. Not publicly, but personally. She would need to speak to people. She would need to make decisions that affected real lives. That afternoon, Mary and Anna visited a small local center Robert had mentioned in his notes. The building was simple, the staff kind but tired. Mary listened more than she spoke. She learned about the challenges they faced. Limited resources. Long waiting lists. Too many people needing help. On the walk home, Mary felt overwhelmed. "There is so much need," she said. "I cannot fix everything." Anna stopped and looked at her. "Robert did not fix everything either," she said. "He helped where he could. That was enough." That night, Mary opened her own notebook and wrote her first entry. She wrote about fear, about doubt, about the responsibility she felt. Writing the words down made them easier to carry. Over the next few weeks, Mary began slowly. She followed Robert's notes carefully. She contacted people he had worked with. She listened. She asked questions. She did not rush. She kept the work quiet, just as Robert had. No announcements. No praise. Only action. Mary noticed changes in herself. She felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired. She felt useful. She felt connected to the world in a way she had not since Robert passed. One afternoon, Mary received a letter at her door. There was no return address. Inside was a simple note. "Someone helped me when I needed it most. I hope one day I can do the same for someone else. Mary held the letter close. She understood then that the work was not about money or plans. It was about breaking a chain of hardship, one link at a time. Still, doubts returned at night. Mary worried about making mistakes. She worried about running out of strength. She worried about honoring Robert's intentions correctly. One evening, she went down into the room alone. She stood in the center and looked around. The room no longer felt hidden. It felt awake. Mary placed her notebook next to Robert's and opened to a blank page. "I am not you," she said quietly. "But I will try." She wrote a promise to herself. She promised to act with care. She promised to stop when she needed rest. She promised to ask for help when she felt lost. As she climbed back up the ladder, Mary felt something settle inside her. The fear had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled her. The choice had been made. The work would continue, not exactly as before, but in a way that honored the heart behind it. And for the first time since discovering the room, Mary felt ready for what came next. Time moved forward, steady and patient. Weeks turned into months, and the house on the quiet street slowly became something more than a place filled with memories. It became a center of careful work, guided by kindness and thought. Mary settled into a new rhythm. Mornings were still calm. She still made her tea and sat by the window, watching the street come alive. But now, after breakfast, she often went into the storage room. She moved the cabinet, lifted the rug, and climbed down the ladder with practiced steps. The hidden room no longer felt secret. It felt familiar. Mary kept everything organized. She followed Robert's system at first, then adjusted it gently to match her own way of thinking. She wrote clear notes. She checked details twice. She learned when to say yes and when to pause. She did not rush decisions. She remembered Robert's words about patience. With Anna's help, Mary stayed connected to the people and groups Robert had trusted. Sometimes she made small visits. Other times she worked quietly through letters and phone calls. She avoided attention. That was important to her. The work was not about being seen. It was about being useful. Mary noticed changes in the neighborhood. They were small at first. A family stayed in their home. A student continued school without interruption. An older neighbor received help with care they could not manage alone. No one knew Mary's role. They only knew that help arrived when it was needed most. One afternoon, Mary received a visit from a young woman named Nina. Nina had been directed to Mary by one of the local centers. She was nervous, her hands twisting together as she spoke. Mary listened without interrupting. When Nina left, she did not look relieved right away. She looked surprised, as if she had not expected to be treated with such calm respect. Mary understood that look. It was the look of someone who had been heard. That evening, Mary went down into the hidden room and sat quietly. She thought about Nina and the others. She thought about Robert and the path he had started long before she knew about it. Mary felt his presence not as a memory that hurt, but as a guide that steadied her. As the year passed, Mary grew stronger in ways she did not expect. Her body still moved slowly, but her confidence grew. She trusted her judgment more. She learned to accept help herself when she needed it. One winter morning, a strong storm passed through the area. Power lines were damaged, and several homes were left without heat. Mary worked with local groups to make sure help reached those who needed it most. She stayed in the background, focused on coordination rather than control. When the storm ended, people spoke about how the community came together. Mary listened quietly from her window, her tea warming her hands. She did not feel the need to correct anyone or take credit. The hidden room continued to hold records, plans, and quiet moments of reflection. Mary added her own notebooks beside Robert's. Together, they told a story of two lives connected by shared values, even across time. One day, Mary found herself sitting in the chair, reading through the earliest notebook again. She smiled at how careful Robert had been, how steady. She saw her own handwriting now, slightly shakier, but just as clear in purpose. Mary realized then that the room had never been about secrets. It had been about space. Space to think. Space to act without noise. Space to choose kindness freely. Anna continued to visit often. They shared meals and quiet laughter. Anna never pushed Mary to explain the work she was doing. She understood that some things were meant to stay quiet. "You seem lighter," Anna said one afternoon. Mary nodded. "I feel connected," she replied. "Not just to Robert. To the world." As time passed, Mary made plans for the future. She knew she would not be able to continue the work forever. She began preparing, just as Robert had. She trained 2 trusted people slowly, sharing knowledge without urgency. She made sure the system could continue without her. One evening, Mary wrote a letter and placed it in a new envelope. On the front, she wrote a simple instruction. "Open when the time is right." She placed the letter in the metal box and locked it carefully. Mary stood in the center of the room and looked around one last time that night. She felt peace. The house above felt warm and alive. It was no longer filled with unanswered questions. It was filled with meaning. On a quiet afternoon, Mary sat by the window again. The street looked the same as it always had. Children played. Cars passed. Neighbors greeted each other. No one knew about the room beneath her house. No one knew about the work that had been done there. And that was exactly how it was meant to be. Mary closed her eyes and smiled softly. The secret her husband had hidden had shocked her at first. But in the end, it gave her something unexpected. Purpose. And through that purpose, his quiet legacy lived on, changing lives in ways that would never need applause, only continuation.